If you are like really dominating in your like day-to-day life, sometimes it is nice to be able to just like go home, have sex and be like, I don't want to fucking think about a single thing.
There are some men out there that need to learn the difference between calling themselves a dom and just wanting to degrade women.
That's when it's scary because you're like, oh my God, it's real. Like you really actually want to hurt me and you are egged on by my pain. All right, it's The Hookup. Welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in. My name is Pip. I am an Aquarius, and I am somewhat of a switch, I would say. Oh. Maybe slightly dom leaning, but clearly not today. If you are watching on YouTube, on video, you would see this outfit. I'm gagged at this.
Hi, I'm Dee Salmon. I'm a Gemini and I'm a pillow princess, but you wouldn't tell by looking at my outfit. I decided to dress up for this ep because we're talking about dom sub. We'll get into it in a sec, but I was like, what is the most dom vibe I have in my closet?
Let me describe it for all the people listening. It is a pinstripe black jacket with like grommets going up it, so it's like attached underneath this zipper. It's got like a mini collar and it's like basically like looks like a choker, and it's got lapels on it as well. You look like you're straight out of a goth rave.
Isn't it fucking incredible?
No, it's awesome.
I found this in an op shop and it's vintage from LA. Like it's proper vintage. It is so stunning.
What
and I think I paid like $9 for it.
But like that's the thing, like what spurred you to buy this? Because it's really out of your wheelhouse in terms of your fashion.
I think I knew that we were doing this episode.
Deep down, you knew. One day I will be a dominatrix.
I do love to plan an outfit. But as we'll get into this episode, like I'm quite a dominant person.
Yes.
But I'm not in the bedroom. So it's like sometimes I like to dress like this if I'm feeling like, let's fucking slay, let's get shit done.
She's flipping the script today.
Yeah. But then like, you know, you'll never see me wearing this. Anywhere else except for this hookup bedroom.
This honestly looks like something that should be in my wardrobe. But I'm really proud of you and you look really hot.
Thank you.
As you would have clicked on this episode, we're talking about dom and sub in the relation of sex in the bedroom, as you've just said. They are dynamics that I think by the end of this, I'm going to want to explore a little bit more.
Well, so famously, she mentions it every episode. Pip is famously on the apps. And you have actually, like, you'll be telling me about the guys that you're messaging or the people that you're seeing. And you will, like, reference, like, oh, they've got, like, dom in their bio or this is in their, like, and you have said that people are adding, like, sub or dom or switch or whatever it is into their bios more and more. Like, you're noticing a trend.
Yeah, definitely noticing it more. And whether or not they actually mean what they say when they say this in the bio, it remains to be seen, actually, because I think a lot of people don't realize what these terms are and whether or not they can actually commit to what this kink is, if they even realize that they're tapping into a kink, or if they just mean, I'm just like, I like to take the lead, or I like rough sex. Like that might mean to them dominant, but to somebody else, it could mean something completely different.
Which is what we're going to get into in this episode because, if you're new to the hookup, we exist for you. We get DMs from you on our Instagram at @the hookup, and we got a particular DM about this from someone who wanted to know a little bit more about what it means to be a dom, because a guy that she's sleeping with claims that he is one, but we've got a lot to say about that.
We got news for you, babe. Let's get into it.
All right, so just a bit of a heads up with this episode. We are going to be talking a bit about assault and abuse. So if you aren't in the right headspace, maybe tap out of this episode or come back to it when you feel like you're up to it. But we are going to explore when people like non-consensually assault you during sex and try and like under the guise of being a dom. We're going to get into that later. But this has all come up because we specifically got this DM from Bree.
Yeah. So Bree sent us a message and she said, I met a guy on Hinge and we had sex after our second date. He told me that he is a dominant when it comes to relationships and sex because he likes it when things go his way. So when we had sex the first few times, I didn't really notice it because it wasn't like chains and whips and stuff. It was how he played out sex. He always wanted to be on top. He always wanted me to come and he didn't need to. He would put me in some positions that were nice at first, but then got a little uncomfortable because he was in too deep and my legs were hurting. And he really insisted on these positions. It made me feel like he wanted to own all of my pleasures. Bree says, I don't know how to feel about this, but I would really appreciate some insight into this. Is this what dominance in a sexual relationship is? So we put this up on our Instagram at Triple J the Hookup if you're not already following us. There were so many reactions to this. People were like, whoa, this is not how it should be.
Yeah.
And before we get into this whole chat, again, a content warning, obviously, but also just so you know, we're going to be exploring dominance in the bedroom, like in an intimate way as like a sex thing, not as a relationship thing. So this like slave master stuff over here outside of the bedroom.
Yeah.
We're not really going to be talking about that. But this in the bedroom, yes.
And I think it's worth noting that these terms have come from the kink community, right? But like we've been saying, they have been used by people in a way that maybe doesn't actually mean that they're practicing dominance or submissiveness in sex as a kink practice.
Yes.
So that's something that, we're going to explore. But I think in this sense, when we're talking about dom and sub and the dynamic and the power dynamic at play, we are just talking about it across like all genders, all sexuality, when anyone is choosing to use those terms.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did a poll. We asked you, what turns you on? Being dominant was 8% of you. 25% of you said being submissive. Switching it up, 56%. And I don't really know, 12%.
I find the 8% being dominant really interesting because
Me
I
too.
feel like we were saying, you were seeing so many people adding dom into their bios on dating apps. And I feel like just culturally there's been this huge kind of movement around like people exploring that side of themselves, whether it's like really corny movies and books like 50 Shades of Grey or whatever it is. But I feel like people are more comfortable being a dom.
Yeah, I think it's 100% like the pop culture of it.
Yeah.
And also looking at our audience, like to give you a little peek behind the curtain, like we have a pretty almost even split of male, female audience members in our Instagram. And so I thought that maybe more guys would be like, I'm more dom, but I guess maybe they're more like I'm switching it up or I'm submissive. It is really interesting stats. And we're going to start, I think, with submissive at 25% of you saying this is what turns you on. See that? The note. Turns you on versus like I'm
not what you identify with.
not exactly like as a label. So let's talk about the definition of like what exactly submissive means. So in the context of sex, submissive generally refers to a willingness to be led, controlled, or directed by a partner in sexual activities. It involves yielding to a dominant partner's desires and taking a more passive role in sexual interactions. So we asked you, what does that kind of look like for you? Izzy saying a big thing for her is like if his voice is commanding and low, it really turns me on longer than just looks, especially while giving instructions and praising me. And I really need that voice to make me submissive, which if you're a fan of audiobooks, if you're a fan of James McAvoy, you know, that kind of vocal stuff, like that is really, really big. And obviously like Izzy's like, I like someone telling me what to do, give me instructions and encourage me.
We also got this voice memo from Josie explaining why she likes being submissive.
When I am submissive, I love being told what to do. I do have a little bit of a praise kink, which is weird because in my real life it is hard to accept compliments, but in a sexual environment I will take all of the compliments and all of the praise when I'm being a good girl.
Oh, I love that so much. Kiana saying, I love being a sub. I dated a dom for a year. Best sex ever. When it's done right, you feel safe and in control, which is what we love to hear. And Kate also sent us this voice memo.
I'm absolutely a sub. I've tried switching and have enjoyed elements of it, but I absolutely feel my sexiest when I'm subbing. It's just nice to switch off as someone who has to make a lot of decisions in their day-to-day lives.
This was a huge thing in the DMs from you. And I think it's something that like I kind of like what I was saying before relate to, but so many of you said that you have so much control and responsibility in your own personal life at work. Paige says, I like to be submissive in sex because I have so much that I have to do at work. Georgia says, love being submissive because I've always been a mother to men who have had unresolved family traumas, engaged in drug use and needed taking care of when no one else could handle them.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, so I feel like for a lot of people, if you are like really dominating in your like day-to-day life, sometimes it is nice to be able to just like go home, have sex and be like, I don't want to fucking think about a single thing.
Yeah.
You take control. I'm just going to lay back and relax.
I totally understand that. And I think like what we were saying before about like some pop culture influences on like I'm going to say that so much in this episode.
Dob
Sub.
sub.
I meant dom sub dynamics is that you often think it's like a CEO board member like Baby Girl, Nicole Kidman in that movie, and she's like top dog of the company and then she's, submissive to this guy. But it also can manifest in a way where people are kind of like what Georgia said, like caregivers. So if you're like a nurse or if you work in like aged care or something like that, and then you're taking care of people like that, it can be that sort of role as well. And I think sometimes people always think it's like the badass CEO bitch, but it's not always like that.
Not always.
So,
and I think that like guys probably would be more submissive, or maybe I wish we could have a gender split with our polls because that would be really interesting. But I think that guys actually would be more submissive if it wasn't such a gendered stereotype that like it's seen as more feminine or something.
Or weaker.
To like want someone to take control and be the dominant one in the bedroom if you're having like heterosex or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. So on that topic, let's talk about the doms. So what exactly is then dominance and what does it mean to be dominant? So essentially it's somebody who likes to take control. And they are calling the shots, they're taking the lead. And what that can kind of manifest into is sort of like, let's say you're role playing and they're like taking control of the scenario. Or there might be like physical constraints involved.
Or like telling you what to do, like get on the bed, spread your legs, blah, blah, blah. Like they're the ones.
Commanding.
Yeah. And we're going to get into what it actually means to be a dom in a sec. There are like definitely rules and like ways that you actually do this really well and consensually from the kink community. But what we wanted to touch on, which is the DM that we got from Brie at the start, was that we had such a huge response from you where people were saying that this is people who sleep with men specifically, that people were saying that they were a dom, but they were acting kind of abusively.
Yeah,
right?
like borderline sexual assault.
Yeah. So we had this DM from Frankie who said most guys calling themselves dom either have no idea what that really means or they have a thing for physical abuse and don't respect you.
Yeah, we had this voice memo from Shannon talking about that.
There are some men out there that need to learn the difference between calling themselves a dom and just wanting to degrade women, because being dominant is about mutual trust, communication, and shared pleasure. And if it's not about birth of your shared pleasure, then it's not a kink. It's just justification to abuse and degrade women. And I think that's quite plain and simple. And I think that we really need to teach people to learn the difference between these power dynamics and what they actually mean and the reason why they're used.
I mean, that's what we're hoping to do with this episode today. We also got this one from Kira.
I think that a lot of potentially men kind of misinterpret the whole dominance thing as aggression, and they just use it as a way almost to act out this like deep-rooted aggression towards women. And I don't think that all men have this, but I think that it is kind of like a suppressed emotion that then can tend to come out in these sort of situations. So, I have experienced, men where you can kind of see like this look in their eyes and the way that they're responding to certain things like pain and all that, and they're just like egged on by it, and they like really enjoy that whole like I'm in control, I'm hurting them almost. And I think that's very different to just a man who wants to like, be on top and like relishes like the thrill of being the one who's like stronger and like, like bigger and more powerful. And I think that is where the difference lies.
Can I just say, firstly, it is so scary to think that this is something that people are using in their bios. They're masking like potentially these really violent tendencies and aggression and using this word to get away with it and to say, oh, no, like you asked for this. I told you I was a dom. This is the agreement that we did. But it's never in a safe way. And a lot of people messaged us with so many similar experiences to this. Like it was genuinely so shocking to hear from so many of you who can relate to these stories.
And like a part of me really hopes that this is just the impact of maybe porn or what they think being a dom means without actually doing any research or educating themselves around it or having like consensual conversations with their partner. But like with Bree's instance, for example, the DM she sent, like Bree, I think it was like one of the first guys she's ever slept with. And if this guy has known this and then called himself a dom and then taken advantage of someone who's in a bit more of a vulnerable position, because she doesn't probably understand what it means to be a dom. So she's just like, oh, like she literally said she was in pain. And he's being like, no, that's just a dom being a dom.
Yeah, and like you're weak-minded for not enjoying it. Like,
and like you're not
what?
acting like a proper submissive or something.
Yeah, it is terrifying to think that amongst the ranks of people who might actually genuinely be like kinksters are people who are just using this as a title, slapping a badge on and being like, yep, I can get away with it because I've got this label, I'm a dom.
Kinksters, like people who were part of this community were messaging us being like, this is so fucked.
Yeah. They were horrified at this.
And, oh God, okay, we're going to get into it. Not only, are people using this in the wrong way, but they're actually sexually assaulting people. So we had a lot of messages about this. Someone said, I had a dom strangle me repeatedly during sex without any warning. I thought I was going to pass out beneath him. I now know how dangerous it is to strangle someone with so much force and would never even consent to it. And research does show, like this has been a bit of a cultural conversation here in Australia. Like research shows that there has been a rise in strangulation being used in sex. And it's really complex and a lot of it points to people just mimicking what they see in porn. But yeah, it's really scary that people might be just using the label dom to get away with literally assaulting another person.
Yeah, we had a DM from Rach saying, I broke things off with a guy who said he was a dom, but we reconnected months later. He came over to mine and I was sat on my couch. He walked straight into the door, straight up to me, pushed me off the couch and slapped me so hard that I fell to the ground. When I regained myself, I said, what the fuck? And he used being a dom as an excuse. Like, that is horrific. Like to be literally slapped to the ground in your own house and like you thought you were entering an agreement where it was like, okay, cool. Like they know the rules, I know the rules. This is going to be like a consensual thing, but no, like that is just horrific. We also got a voice memo from Ellie talking about an instance where she was also slapped.
I went on a date. We knew it was going to be a hookup. It was going chill, like had a couple of glasses of wine, got chatting, ended up talking about the BDSM test online. I'd done it before, he hadn't done it, so I got him to do it and we compared results. And he said, oh, I'm quite, like my results are quite dominant, but we didn't have the conversation about like, I would like to dominate you or I would like to do this thing to you. So I just assumed we were going to have like pretty normal kind of sex. And then he ties my hands behind my back and I was like, oh yeah, cool, I'm down with this. Like, but then he turns the lights off because he said he didn't have a blindfold. So he's like, I'm going to turn the lights off. And then I couldn't see a bloody thing and it was terrible. Like you didn't know where the other person was or like how to touch them or what was going on. He went to slap my cheek. We had not discussed whether slapping was okay or not. And instead of just like gently slapping me on the cheek, he smacked me almost as hard as possible around the side of the head and on my ear. And my ear was ringing for days. And it was so awful. Like I was just not expecting that. It came completely out of the blue. And clearly this guy thinks he is a dom, but knows nothing about safe kink.
Literally everyone's saying that about these experiences.
That is literally assault.
I know. You could
what
go to the
do you
police.
fucking mean?
It's fucked up. And it's like, I cannot stress enough, like we got so many DMs about this. Like,
why would you even want to do that to another person?
Because you might have been an incel. I don't know. You've got like
Jesus
hate against
Christ.
women. I don't know. Like it's It must be studied. It needs to be studied because it was shocking how common this experience was. Like I was genuinely shocked at our DMs. And it's so frustrating and disappointing because it's clearly people who don't have any education in terms of what safe kink is, what even this kink is in general.
Yeah, they're just using the term dom.
They completely misusing and misunderstanding these terms. And like, yeah, a lot of you messaged us and said that's what you think the problem is as well, including Charlotte.
I think there are just too many people misusing labels like dom and sub without understanding what those things really mean and the responsibility that comes with them in terms of communication, consent, mutual respect, care. They also look very different depending on what you like. There's the very kink-based BDSM dom-sub interactions, but at the other end of the scale, there's things like what I'm describing. I simply derive enjoyment from a man taking the lead in the bedroom, and in that sense, I am more submissive. But that doesn't mean I'm okay with someone just walloping me on the ass without any warning.
So it seems like there's people who are harboring aggression against women and using it as an excuse, but then there are people who just are genuinely like have no idea and they're misusing it and maybe their intentions weren't bad, but they just genuinely lack the knowledge and the education on how to have these conversations.
I think, yeah, we have to acknowledge as well that porn plays such a huge part, like we were saying with the strangulation before, that especially at a younger age, you might watch that. Well, we know that you watch that. The average age that a young boy watches porn is 10 to 11 years old. I'm assuming they're not having sex at that age. So like that's the script that you're learning from, right? And you don't have the skills yet to know that you have to have a conversation and you have to talk about consent. You have to talk about what people are into and build that safety net. So of course you are just going to look at what you're saying in porn and be like, right, this is how you have sex. And this was something that Will sent us a voice memo about.
Not this thing you can sort of just pick up and do with no knowledge or experience. Like you have to have looked sort of internally at yourself about why you enjoy it and why you want to do it. And it's always a bit of a red flag when someone says it right off the cuff, but can't back up why they say it or even how they would do it. Like there's so much communication and safety that has to go on to a proper kink or dom sub based relationship or dynamic, and people just don't get that. And I think that comes from porn and how that shapes young men's views of sex and young women's as well. But a lot of the time it's young men who assume they have to be dominant and that dominance looks like really rough sex with a lot of hitting and choking and slapping and spitting, but they don't know how to do it safely, and that's how people end up being really traumatized and really hurt.
This just reminded me of a time with someone I used to date and they slapped me like mid-sex.
Out of nowhere?
Yeah, out of nowhere. And I was, like they were on top and I was like underneath and it just happened and I was like, oh my God, like I had no idea how to react and like we had not communicated and talked about it at all. And now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, like you learned that from seeing it in porn, I guess. Like you just saw that happen and you just tried it.
It's so common. And it's interesting as well because, yeah, like obviously a lot of these examples and stories we've been hearing from you have been guys doing it to women. But we actually got this voice memo from Todd who actually said that a partner he slept with did it to him.
Yeah, so I just want to preface this by saying that this girl had just gotten out of like a 4-year-long relationship. Like she'd clearly been very used to, I don't know, consent being a bit more of like an implied thing and you can kind of experiment a little bit. But this was a new relationship I was experiencing with her. And we were having sex. I was on top and then she started just like smacking me in the face. And I was kind of like, all right, I'll lean into it. So I like reciprocated it. And then she got on top and then kept smacking my face and then pinned my hands. And I was like, oh God, oh my God. And like threw her off. And I was like, oh, I can't do this. Like it was just a really stressful situation because like I'm a big guy and she was like quite small, but it just felt very like disempowering. And I've always had such an emphasis of like feeling safe during sex and creating like a safe environment. And it just suddenly felt very not safe. Like afterwards, she was very apologetic though. Like don't take it as her being like abusive or anything.
Yeah, see that like it's just a conversation that you had to have. And it's so crazy actually hearing that as well from a male perspective. And it's so important that we hear that because it absolutely can happen the other way around. And like, yeah, him being like, I was a big guy and I was having a panic attack. Like that's so severe. And like it could have been avoided if they had just spoken about it. But people get, I guess, complacent or...
Well, she might have learned it from her previous relationship of 4 years. Like maybe that was the kind of sex that she has only ever had. And so therefore she now thinks that like slapping is just a normal part of sex.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what we were saying about with porn before.
Yeah.
But this is why so many people who actually practice dom sub dynamics in sex were messaging us being like, like, where is the conversation?
Yeah.
So let's chat a little bit about what we learned from them, because the secret actually is, Pip, with a proper kink dynamic of like dom sub, the sub is actually the one who calls the shots and the one who is always in control. And this was something that Dan sent us a DM about.
My partner is more sub-leaning, and we've spent a long time developing trust and mutually understood boundaries. I definitely know very well how these power dynamics in sex can be done in harmful ways, but I reckon one of the keys to a healthy approach, other than your standard informed, enthusiastic consent, is understanding the secret that the sub is actually always in charge. Because, in a dom-sub context, the dom obviously has so much power in that moment. So in order to make sure there's that consent and that safety, it's got to be the sub who's ultimately drawing the boundaries and calling the shots and knows that they can call it off at any time. And if that understanding isn't there, then I don't think the dynamic can be done in such a healthy way.
And you know what? That's what the real doms are saying. The fake doms would never, ever, ever consider that for a second. And it's interesting because, like, from my understanding and especially learning from this episode, like, you go into this thing and it's like, it's a bit of a persona, right? Like, it's a bit of a performance, and unless you are doing it outside of the bedroom and you're like, okay, that's my daddy and I'm the slave.
Yeah.
But in the bedroom, it's like, we all know what's going on here. There are rule books. And if you want to rescind like consent or like take back and say, actually, no, that's like a bit too much, use the safe word. Like, a real dom is like, done, good, we're okay. And it was interesting because we got a voice memo from Amy sort of explaining how that sort of operates in her world in terms of like it being a bit of a performance and everyone knows what's going on.
Essentially, in my experience, the dynamic is only fun when everyone is aware that the power play is not real, and in some ways it's a bit of a performance and everyone feels really safe and there's been communication beforehand. Whereas my previous experience, there was no communication of that beforehand, and it became really clear that the power dynamic physically and emotionally was actually real and it didn't feel super safe. I used the word no several times. Consent was not respected and it was not enjoyable at all because those really clear boundaries weren't set from the get-go.
And like going back to those people who messaged us and they were like, I think that these fake doms are basically people who hate women and they want to like actually harm us and like use this as a label to get away with abuse. Exactly what Amy's saying. It's like, that's when it's scary because you're like, oh my God, it's real. Like you really actually want to hurt me and you are egged on by my pain.
And if you don't know much about dom sub, which, a lot of us don't, like we're just kind of learning, and we've learned so much just from the DMs we got from so many of you. But you wouldn't know that you have to, there's like a process where you can vet the fake doms, right?
Yes.
And Kate sent us a voice memo about this.
I've been able to weed out lots of the wannabe doms by asking pretty clear and specific questions early on, sometimes even before meeting, especially if they want to talk about what kind of sex I would be looking for with them. The questions that I've asked that seem really helpful have been, what's the worst BDSM experience you've had and what's been the most enjoyable? And also, what does aftercare mean to you? I feel like if they can't answer those questions to my satisfaction, they definitely don't get to do dominant things to me. Also, I think it needs to be said that the Venn diagram of wannabe doms and podcast bros is a circle.
Firstly, great questions, by the way.
Yes.
Because, you can imagine if someone was out to get you. God, that sounds so bad. We're giving doms a bad reputation here. We actually think there are great doms out there. But if you are up against somebody who is a fake dom, they wouldn't be able to answer that. They'd literally be like, aftercare.
Yeah.
No,
What
you're
are
my
you talking
sub.
about? Yeah.
You literally leave.
I just do what I want.
Yeah, you do what I tell you to do, and that's that, and that's final.
What was interesting as well is like a lot of people who are identifying as like more of a dom or have more of a dominant role in the sex dynamic that they have, the pleasure of the other person is the most important thing.
Yes.
But then like with Bree's DM that she originally sent us, like he kind of hid behind that and said like, I want to like own your orgasms or whatever he said. Like
Yeah, it was kind of like threatening. It was like a threatening aura of like, I own all of your pleasures. And he was saying, I don't care.
He always wanted me to come.
Yeah.
And he didn't need to. He would put me in some positions that were nice at first, but then uncomfortable. It made me feel like he wanted to own all my pleasures. And it's like, if you actually genuinely wanted to get someone off and make them feel pleasure and you be the facilitator of that, like, you wouldn't be comfortable with them being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Because they're not experiencing pleasure.
Exactly. It's a lot. It's a lot. Now, look, I kind of think I said it before where I was like, I feel like we're giving doms a bad reputation here.
Yes.
But we're not. Because there are a lot of people who know how to dominate and be a dom successfully and delightfully, may I say. There's this label that I've been seeing a lot on the apps, pleasure doms, and Jimmy sent us a voice memo about this.
Basically, for me, being a pleasure dom is like you're in charge, but at the same time, you will do anything for the partner because you just can't feel, well, I just can't feel that pleasure of having sex and feel satisfied unless I know that my partner is having a good time and feeling satisfied. So it's like the illusion of being in charge, but you are doing what they want you to make them feel good. And I feel like pleasure dom is less in charge. I think part of it very much is being submissive, and part of it very much is doing things because you want to be, you know, really, really doing stuff and really putting in that effort for them. So I think dom, that to me is like, but pleasure dom is like, that's good. That's a balance and mix.
Jimmy's voice is so
I know. It's kind of a head fuck though to get your brain around all of this.
Yeah,
because you're
I'm
like,
but you're a dom, but you're a sub, but you're a dom.
You're a dom, but you're obsessed with their pleasure. So you will kind of like low key submit, but you would still dominate. It is nuanced. Like this is not high school. This is like bachelor level sex. Like this is hard. Like
it's a master's.
Masters.
You have to be a master to be able to pull off dom sub.
Well, you would know, wouldn't you?
Do you know what I think you might be? A pleasure dom mummy.
Says you in this outfit.
I know, but like, I just feel like this is I feel like you have potential to be a pleasure dom mummy. Listen to Josie explain it.
I also love to be a pleasure dom mummy, which is a very caring role. There's a lot of nurturing, a lot of reassurance. There is a lot of checking in. So when I am in the dom mummy role, I like to be in control of my submissive's pleasure. So I will tell them when they can and can't do things. I will tell them they're being such a good boy or such a good girl when they are doing the things that mummy likes them to do. I also let them ask me nicely if they can do something for myself. So if they say, I want to XYZ, then I will be like, no, you have to ask mummy nicely. What would you like to do? And then their reply would be, Mummy, can I please XYZ? And then I say, yes, of course. So being a pleasure dom, it's more about saying, you would look so amazing on your knees for me. I would love it if you did XYZ. That would make me so happy. It's very rewarding and it is all about my submissive's pleasure and putting them into that space where they feel safe and comfortable being vulnerable.
Are you hot?
Love that. That's a bit of me.
That is you.
That's a bit of me. Like calling, like saying like, yeah, won't you be like a good boy or a good girl? And then like, yeah, somebody calling me mummy. Oh, I kind of like that.
I think she did it in such a hot way that I was like,
Right?
you wouldn't think, I don't think mummy is hot, but then she just did it in such a, I was like, oh, Josie, it was hot.
Okay. So where are the pleasure mummies in the apps? I'm not seeing any of them. Seeing a lot of pleasure doms and brat tamers.
But this is what I mean. I feel like there's a lot of pressure maybe for guys to not lean too much into the sub thing, even though I think there's a lot of them that would.
Yeah. And like even the term, I guess like what Jimmy was saying before, it's kind of like soft doming for men. So like he was kind of like a similar vibe to Josie, but it was like maybe guys don't even want to be called like soft dom because there's all this like gender politics about being like rough in the bedroom and taking control and stuff like that. But kind of on that same thread, we also got some people talking about what it's like to dominate in a hetero relationship like female to male, which I found really interesting. And again, might be a little bit of me. After hearing this, you might feel the same way. This was what Viv told us.
My experience when doming my partner is he is 6'6" and not a small person. It's very empowering, and it took a lot of courage in me because I'm naturally submissive to do it, but he fully submits and just says, have your way with me, and succumbs, and we haven't pushed each other's boundaries where we've had to use our safe words or anything. We've had some of the best times when that's happened.
So if you're listening to this and you're like, I could never dominate my partner, I'm petite, or like I'm really submissive and stuff like that, obviously don't try something you don't feel comfortable in. But like Viv literally being like, we've had some of the best sex of our lives, switching up this dynamic and really playing with power. Huge.
100%. I like, even just listening to that, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, I've had sex before where the guy has like worn a blindfold and I've like, we've discussed what we're going to do, but like I've taken charge and just like, he's been submissive. And I'm like, that was really hot. Like, it's just like, it's kind of hot to have that power.
You
when
just
I'm
have
not
to,
busy being a pillow plant.
Exactly. I was just about to say, it's like if you're the kind of person that like, you feel like you have to really muster up that energy to be able to do it, like sure. But like give it a go at least once in your life.
God,
like
yeah.
tie down your like BFG boyfriend and like tell them what to do because they might also really like it as well. It was interesting because we had a lot of people DM us, like guys being like, I really want this in my life. So Tim saying, I want my girlfriend to use me and tell me what she wants to do for her pleasure. I want her to be more dominant. It makes me feel really sexy, needed, and wanted, which makes complete sense because when you're being pursued like that, like as let's say Tim is like, I want to be more submissive. It's like being pursued. It's like someone confirming that like, yeah, do this. I'm going to tell you what to do. I want to give you pleasure or I want you to like give me, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it works for initiating as well. Like we had a few DMs about initiating, which comes into that power dynamic, right? Where someone as a whole might be more submissive or dominant. And then if you've got two subs, like you're both just not initiating sex at all. Someone said, my partner not initiating at all just feels wrong. Telling me you want me over text is one thing. Initiating in person is something different and a way for me to feel desired. And I know that that's something that a lot of people can struggle with. But I think, yeah, we'll definitely get an expert on the pod to chat about initiating and unpack some of these dynamics as well.
Yeah, 100.
Also, sorry that it's taken us so long to even mention this. We had to obviously talk about the fake DOMs. It's real crisis. But yeah, obviously in the queer world, a lot of terms are used like tops and givers and bottoms and receivers. But these terms might be, so like if you're a top, you're the person who might be topping. Like say you might be wearing a strap on or you might be, giving anal or whatever it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're in a certain position of like giving or topping that you are the dom. And it's the same with bottoms and receivers. Like you can be a power bottom. Like you can be the person who is getting fucked, but you're calling the shots.
Yeah, because I think sometimes people get confused and think that position physically where you're at means that you are dominating, but that doesn't necessarily mean the case.
Totally.
Yeah.
And for a lot of my queer friends, like they like to switch it up.
Yes.
So you might not necessarily, I think this is a huge thing, in the queer world that like you might be a bottom, you might be a top, depends on what you're feeling or depends on the other person that you're sleeping with, the people you're sleeping with. And in our poll, 56% of you said that you would be more of a switch.
I think I kind of identify as a switch. But definitely like maybe leaning a little more dom today. Wow. I don't know.
Your moon rising is in dom.
Oh.
Today.
Love that. So yeah, obviously majority of you are really into switching. We've kind of explained this whole episode what it means to be both.
Yep.
And this is just a switcheroo in the end of the day.
Which I think like you were saying, Pip, it's like if you aren't normally a dom or you don't really take the control, like have a play.
Give it a go.
Give it a go. Have this chat with your partner or partners or people you're sleeping with and just be like, why don't we try this today?
Yeah. And you don't have to slap somebody. You don't have to choke anyone.
Please
you don't
have
to
without actually having a fucking conversation.
Well, exactly. But it's also like I think people just see dom as like whips and chains, Rihanna, S&M. And it doesn't have to be like that. It can literally mean taking a bit of the lead, taking control. Or if you want to take it further, go for it, but get educated.
Yeah.
Please like have that conversation first. And like you said before, we will have an expert talk about this, give you tips on how to have those conversations, how to initiate, and how to do it safely. So I think that's it from us.
Wow. Sorry about this app. As in, like, it went for so long.
It was a big one.
Thank you so much, though.
We'll see you in the DMs.
Okay. Oh, they're going to do some sort of cute little, like, mummy says.
Oh, Mummy says she would love it if you DM'd us your thoughts on this episode. Be a good boy or girl or they. I winked at the camera, by the way. That's what happened. Anyway, okay, bye. Bye. We're done. Bye.